Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. It was a busy news week for biofuels proponents. After 2.5 years, the Treasury Department finally released their guidance for the 45Z tax credit for biofuel production. Joining us now to talk about what we've learned about the 45Z rule is Donnell Rehagen. He serves as the CEO for Clean Fuels Alliance America. And Donnell, thanks for talking with us this week.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
45Z, we've been talking about this. We've been waiting on this for so long. Donnell, fill us in. What did we learn here from the Treasury Department?
Well, the original guidance on 45Z came out a week or so ago, and then we've been waiting for some supplemental information to kind of put the puzzle pieces together a little bit. And so the GREET model, which was that second puzzle piece, was released yesterday. So that's giving our fuel producers a little better opportunity to really see how 45Z is going to work for them. What's the CI score for their feedstocks that they're using? What's the CI score on their finished fuel? Therefore, what's the value of that tax credit to them?
And do you feel as though, does the industry feel as though we got the clarity we need to at least start moving forward on this process from these rulemakings?
I think to start moving forward, yes. I think there's still some pieces that are just not quite clear. As I said, it just came out very recently, so it's really going to matter the most, though, Mike, as to how the market reacts to it. So how does the feedstock market react? How does the fuel supplier piece of this react? Because this credit is very different from what our industry has enjoyed in the past through the blender's tax credit.
Okay, so we've got some big changes coming in terms of the policy itself. And Donnell, my other question is, we've got some big changes coming this next week in Washington, D.C., new administration moving into the role. Since this rule wasn't finalized, does that give the Trump administration the opportunity to put their fingerprints on it, so to speak?
Yeah, actually, that's almost going to be required because, as you mentioned, the rule was not finalized. And so the process of that rulemaking has started through what's been released here over the last couple of weeks. But it will be up to the Trump administration to put the final touches on that. And so it's going to be our job at Clean Fuels to make sure this incoming administration quickly understands the urgency of getting this finalized so that we can bring that clarity to the marketplace that I was speaking of, that lets feedstock suppliers and fuel producers work together to make a product that's in high demand, out in the marketplace.
It's in high demand. Donnell, even with this lack of policy clarity, is the market continuing to move forward and build and grow?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, it's something I'm very, very excited about. We were likely to reach 5 billion gallons of domestic use this last year. Unbelievable to a guy like me who's been in the industry as long as I have. Just 2 years ago, we were a 2.5 billion gallon industry. And so we've doubled in size, and the demand for the fuel is growing. New markets, rail and marine, as well as on-road and the heating oil market. So I think the outlook for our fuels are in high demand, and demand for feedstocks are going to grow. 45Z is going to be a big component of continuing that growth.
And it sounds like continuing to talk about the importance of clean fuels will be crucial in this new administration as well, right?
Well, absolutely. Anytime there's a new administration, there's new education, there's new leaders, there's new decision makers that need to understand how our industry interacts with the agriculture industry, how our industry provides cleaner fuels and helps provide cleaner air. And those are all things that trade associations like ours, that's our responsibility, as well as our members, to make what we can do for this country known.
Donnell, if we've got viewers who want to learn more about Clean Fuels Alliance America and what you're doing for the country, where would you send them?
I'd ship them straight to our website, cleanfuels.org.
Donnell Rehagen, CEO of Clean Fuels Alliance America, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. It was a busy week in the commodity markets following the release last Friday of a number of reports from the USDA. Joining us now to break down those numbers and their impact on the market is Dan Hueber of theHueber Report. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It was, I think, an exciting week, to say the least, in the commodity markets. We saw this corn market really take off rallying. Dan, that crop production report really made traders a little more skittish about supply.
Oh, absolutely. Granted, skittish is a good word. I mean, it really was not what you would call, in-your-face bullish type of report. But anytime you start reducing inventory, you start reducing carryout, it's going to be a little bit price positive. And granted, corn was already on a little bit of a rally, and that just gave it that extra boost it needed to move into some higher ground. So by the end of the week, we seem to have maybe cooled off a little bit here. I mean, not that it necessarily has come apart, but same token, with the news that we were given, taking the carryout down to the 1.5 billion area, which again is not necessarily bullish per se. There's still a very comfortable amount of corn, but if you went back 2-3 months ago, we were probably talking 2 billion plus carryout. So it's that puts a different value on the corn than it did just a few months ago.
It really does. And Dan, it comes on the heels of, as you mentioned, a couple of weeks of upward movement in price on corn. We've been seeing those exports tick up. Sure. Given this run in prices, do you think we'll still see exports stay at the level they were at prior to the end of the year?
Well, generally, if you're not seeing the export business really materialize this time of year, you're not going to see it. So yes, it's bound to drift off. The numbers last week, it's a little bit difficult to really assess them because you were in holiday weeks, but we did set a marketing year low for corn and soybeans both as far as the new sales. So chances are that they're going to tend to drift off as we move on. Of course, as we move closer to availability of South American harvest here over the next few months, that's bound to back off some.
So one of the places when we see a price spike like this happen in the corn market, price spike, of course, relatively back up to those one-year highs.
Sure.
Questions arise about demand, and my question specifically is ethanol. Dan, we've got a new administration coming in. We've got crude oil prices coming down. Does ethanol have a rosy year ahead?
Well, ethanol, of course, as long as there's profitability in the production side of it, they're going to try to produce as much ethanol as possible. Looking down a few months down the road, not that the crystal ball is really very clear at this point, but I mean, in the past or the previous time we had this administration in, they certainly were not friends toward the ethanol industry. We know the oil industry is going to be pushing for more and more dollars into expansion and exploration of crude. So, not that necessarily detracts from ethanol. Like I say, if it's still profitable, we're still going to produce it. But for major expansion, it seems like it's going to be a tough road ahead.
Maybe puts a lid on it, at least growth perspective-wise.
Right.
But you mentioned, if we're producing more crude, we should see crude prices continue to come down. Dan, is that something that you think is in the cards for 2025?
Oh, I believe so. Again, when you look at the world economy, and granted, there's some issues right now. We're putting some restrictions on freight liners, or I should say ocean vessels that are carrying Russian crude. That probably is more of a psychological impact because most of that, Europe has already basically moved away from Russian crude. This probably impacts China more than anyone else, and we're already seeing their economy start to slow down pretty dramatically. So, moving ahead, if we're already producing record amounts of energy in this country. If we really push that envelope even further, it's hard to imagine how we won't see crude oil come lower down the road here a bit.
All right, things to watch. Dan, before we go ahead to a break here,
Sure.
Looking ahead to new crop corn, we did see this move in old crop. Any rationale to start marketing some of that new crop?
Oh, I think at this 460 level that we attained here this week in December corn, I think it's probably a good point to get started. Between 460, 470, certainly, I think you want to be making sales. I don't think the picture really looks like we're going to be able to break away from those levels significantly between now and the end of March, but to be able to push above and beyond there, we're going to have to really want to put more corn acres in the ground, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the case yet.
We're going to need a couple of bullish stories maybe to push us over and above those levels.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll be back for more market conversation with Dan Hueber of theHueber Report. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. And we're back talking the markets with Dan Hueber of the Hueber Report. Dan, before we left, we're talking about the corn market, which did see some moves to the upside following those USDA reports. But we also got the winter wheat seedings data out, up 2.2% year over year. Is the future looking good for wheat?
I wouldn't say it looks dramatically poor, but we just can't come off a dead center here at this point. Now, chances are we're probably going to see a little bit of an increase, particularly when it comes over to feeding of wheat, which is usually not something we do in this country. But with the discrepancy between corn and wheat, I think you could probably see that add up a little bit. That said, I think wheat, as much as anything, is going to be the limiting factor than the corn market at this point in time. And even on the report, they already increased sorghum feeding a little bit. So I think, those are going to be the drags we see in the corn. Not that wheat can't rally, but we're probably going to need to get a weather event to make that happen. And chances are, no, we're not going to do it. Exports are just kind of limping along at a normal pace. So it's without some kind of a weather issue come spring, it's going to be really difficult to get the wheat market to advance much more than it has. The one positive is world inventories were taken down. So if there are some issues, be it Eastern Europe, Russia, or Australia, looks like we're going to come up with a pretty solid crop again. But so not that those kind of happenstance can't come about, but yeah, it's going to be a weather market as far as if we're going to get much strength to the upside.
Black Sea wheat production. We're on year 2 of this Russian invasion of Ukraine. Are they still expected to be producing roughly comparable levels of wheat, at least for the last 2 years?
Well, Russia, of course, has consistently produced pretty good crops up until some weather issues last year. So I have not seen where there's any major weather issues, a winter kill that's happened there. So if any, Ukraine's always going to be limited to what they were pre-war, but at this point in time, nothing over there that's alarming enough to say that we're going to shift a lot of demand back to the United States.
All right, not a reason to pop developing over there in the Black Sea.
At this point in time. Yep.
Let's move over to soybeans,
Yes.
because we also saw the supply picture get a little tighter on the soybean side. Bushel production dropped 1 bushel per acre. Dan, was that a surprise for you?
It was a surprise to see the number come down. That said, the reality of the soybean market, and it was great. I mean, it was nice to see the carryout was, we're down to 380 million, I think, on the carryout. That said, boy, that is not a tight number by any stretch of the imagination. So it's still an increase year over year. And then add in the potential of South America this year. And, right now, a lot of the estimates are 169, 170 million metric ton out of Brazil, still at least 49 to 50 million metric tons out of Argentina. Year over year, that's a 20 million metric ton increase. So you're talking 720, 750 million bushels additional that will be available to the world markets. So that's double our carryout. So it's an overwhelming number to think that we could really do much with the soybean. Not that we can't rally, and again, we could see our normal seasonal type of spring rallies, but boy, to get something crazy to the upside, it just does not seem to be in the cards for the next few months.
Now, we do have good news domestically, as I understand it, from the crush. We are crushing more soybeans than ever before.
Yeah,
is that accurate?
December crush was a record, certainly. So, and here again, too, if the beans are available, which they are, and there's a profit margin in it, and again, the bright spot, of course, in the beans, meal has struggled. Looked like it was going to take a little bounce here in the last couple of weeks. Now, it's pretty much given all that back. Oil was the real leader, and there's where, if we can really get the renewable fuels off the ground, oil, no pun intended there, on the airline side. But if we can get those moving a little bit better, that could be the saving grace over in the soybean market.
Lots to watch for in the soybeans. Dan Hueber of the Hueber Report, as always, thanks for joining us and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Greg Soulje now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg Soulje has been looking over the maps and charts and keeping an eye on what's to come in the Pacific Northwest. And Greg, fill us in.
Pretty quiet weather picture out there. The quiet of the winter weather pattern, as in moisture recharge, next to nil. Of course, this is the particular setup where the jet stream pattern comes in off the Gulf of Alaska, down the Front Range along the divide. And of course, you continue to dump colder air into the nation's midsection, but there's warmth, if you will, up aloft, and that ridging effect does two things: keeps moisture at bay across the Pacific, and of course farther south, we'll talk about it, we are not done by any means with that Santa Ana weather pattern into Southern California. It'll be a continuation of the series of trials moving on through here, with another feature making its way through the Southern Canadian prairie. Temperatures are bitter and biting, and they will likely return to that same category with another frigid air mass here over the middle and late portions of the week, in particular to the Southern Canadian prairie. I'll move on southward, and we'll add a little dash of snow and snow shower activity and flurry activity across parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest, where snow cover is a bit lacking, significant across the Cascades of northern Sierra and next to nil, as we'll see farther down to the south. In any event, here it is, Salt Lake City, high pressure, that clockwise flow here, low pressure here down across areas of the Rio Grande, and again, that's a counterclockwise flow. You combine that easterly flow and compress it down across the Santa Ana ranges, and so ebbing and flowing blowing. Some days those wind gusts are better than 50 to 60 miles per hour. Some days they're much lighter. In any event, this is the scenario. Again, we've talked about it in the longer range. No organized moisture as we go forward for the rest of the wintertime season in the southwestern reaches of the country. A couple of snow showers and flurries into the plains where the cold air reestablishes itself as well. We'll get a little uptick in temperature readings here briefly late in the week out of the southern plains, and more wind and dryness related issues into Southern California and the valleys of California too.
You mentioned that light snow cover across the Midwest. Greg, any chance for additional snow over the northern Corn Belt?
Just some passing snow showers and flurries, these little skiffs, these little outbreaks, clipper systems on the move. Otherwise, it's just doggone cold here to start off the week with widespread sub-zero cold. It'll reach all the way down past the Ohio. Remember, the more significant snow cover really lies out over the central and southern Corn Belt areas, a little more patchy into the upper Midwest and northern Plain States area. That's the story early parts of the week. Middle parts of the week, we do get a brief reprieve, slightly milder, more seasonal air moves, and from the plains into the Corn Belt locales, we'll get a little warm frontal snow, but again, on its heels, a much colder air mass once again building across the Canadian prairie that'll be on the move as well here as we move through the mid to late portions of the week. The longer range forecast is just loaded up with cold and more cold, and probably a cold start to the springtime season. A freeze, a hard one once again into South Texas citrus. Much colder air laying on out. We'll keep an eye on this weather system here. We wouldn't be surprised over the late portions of the week that as the system moves on through, not only do we have a little rain, there'll probably be a couple of snowflake reports as well into parts of the Delta region, would you believe? More chill in the air across the areas of the southern plains, dry in the southwestern regions of the country. A couple of scattered showers into Texas and the lower Mississippi Valley. Things are going to be pretty interesting, Mike, later into the week as we move into the southeastern part of the country with regard to winter storm potential.
Well, let's go all the way to the East Coast. Greg, what are you seeing up north first?
Lake effect snows continue on, and another shot of this bitter biting air with readings down below zero past the Ohio early on into the week. We'll get a couple of deep lows make their way and continue to crank this cold air on southward. Little rain snow mix in through the mid-Atlantic region. Additional snow showers and flurries into the northeast and New England. Late portion of the week, maybe a brief reprieve over the Ohio Valley. More cold air into the northeast and New England, and another reinforcing shot over sections of the northern plains. Here is that southeastern perspective, cold in through areas of Texas and the western Gulf Coast, chilling the air across the mid-Atlantic region. Rain snow mix into parts of the Tennessee Valley, a couple of showers in through Florida. Later into the week, a rain snow mix along the Texas Gulf Coast, lower Delta, parts of the Tennessee Valley, and across the mid-Atlantic region as well, with a cold rain with showers, a couple of thunderstorms down through Florida. Some of these moisture outbreaks here are certainly welcome from a drought standpoint, but watch for winter storm potential later in the week across the Gulf Coast.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. After that long presidential campaign and then, of course, the holiday break for the House and Senate, things are happening in Washington, D.C. once again. Next week, President Donald Trump will be sworn in as the next president of the United States. But last week, the Senate was going through his confirmation hearings. They interviewed a number of his nominees for different positions, including Scott Bessent, Donald Trump's nominee to head the Treasury Department. During his confirmation hearing, Bessent spoke repeatedly about the need to support the value of the dollar, to defend the value of the dollar. And that got me thinking, what does it mean in the context of commodities? Earlier in the program, Dan Hueber was in to talk markets, and he agreed to stick around for a little bit longer. And Dan, let's talk about what this means when we see the value of the dollar where it is today, historically strong. What does that mean for commodities broadly?
Well, on a historical precedence, the stronger the dollar, the more adverse that is to commodity prices, particularly when it comes to export trade. And granted, there's never a one-to-one correlation there. There's always other mitigating factors that can make that impact that. But that said, if the dollar does maintain the strength, certainly people will look elsewhere. I mean, we are kind of a residual supplier for many to begin with, and if they can find other products that are cheaper, all the better. Secondary, the prices in Brazil to Brazilian farmers are directly have an inverted relationship to the dollar. So the higher the dollar goes, actually the better their prices are for the farmers down there. So yeah, if anything, it would encourage South American production even further than it already is expanding. So.
As we think about ways that a Treasury Department or any elected official could support the value of the dollar, Dan, what are some things that could be in the toolbox in that context?
Well, of course, I mean, you could do it via money supply, although I don't think they're probably going to mess around with that at this point in time. You know, and again, I really think what he's talking is more rhetoric at this point, at least kind of talking up the dollar. The dollar has had a tremendous rally over the past year, is at the highest levels it's been in probably over a year, of course, at this point in time. The catch-22 with the, particularly if tariffs start to come into play, and I think, of course, that's where it's making people just a little bit nervous. You don't really know how people are going to react to that. But if tariffs go higher and the dollar goes lower, then that cost is really going to be impacted or felt, there we go, find the right word, felt by the consumer. If you have a strong dollar and higher tariffs, it kind of mitigates that tariff effect. So, I mean, certainly they would love to see the dollar continue to strengthen. So if tariffs do go into effect, it will not have as direct a correlation on the American consumer as it would if the dollar was steady or lower.
Now, that is a fascinating, that helps really put the context in, put this conversation into context. Dan, anything you would be advising to producers, given that we could see tariffs and a stronger dollar in the year ahead?
Well, just in general, of course, I mean, I think we've got several years of probably thin margins ahead. You know, this is really time just to have your pencil sharpened and, you know, be aggressive marketers. When you're in the profit zone, take advantage of it. Don't look for anything wild to the upside. That's
a great point. Dan Hueber of theHueber Report, thanks for sticking around and filling us in.
My pleasure, thanks.
Well, let's talk about those exports. Recently, I had the chance to talk with John Newton, the executive director of Terrain, and I asked him, how have exports been looking recently?
If you've looked at the export markets as we stand today, we've come off some really strong weeks of corn exports. I think if you look back over the last 2 decades, our pace of export commitments are among the highest they've been in quite a while on the corn side. That's the reason why you've seen the rally in corn that we've seen. Mexico's our #1 customer. Canada's our #2 customer. China's our #3 customer. We know that when we have a strong export environment in U.S. ag, the farm economy is more healthy. And that's critically important as we go into next year.
And is there a way that that farmers on the ground can tell that story? Is there still value in that in 2025, the export story?
I think it's more important than ever before. And flash back to 2017 when President Trump, you know, his first administration, he talked about getting out of NAFTA. And who was the champion of agriculture in the room? It was Secretary Perdue. He said, President Trump, let me show you how important trade is to agriculture and rural America, the folks that put you in the White House. And I think that's why this next Secretary of Agriculture is going to be critically important, somebody that can stand in the Oval Office and talk about why these markets are so important for American agriculture and the opportunities that are there.
You mentioned NAFTA, which became the USMCA under President Trump. Do you see this incoming administration jumping on any trade deals, any that stand out to you, maybe they didn't get done the first time around?
Well, I think there's opportunities to say, hey, you know, we put our gold stamp on USMCA, you know, formerly NAFTA. How's that working? Are there things that could be working better? Obviously, you need a new, you know, trade ambassador, you know, potentially Mr. Lighthizer, to get in the room and start thinking about that. You look at the Phase 1 agreement with China, that wasn't completed. If you read the Phase 1 agreement, I don't know how many people have, I have. Have you?
I did, back when it came out.
There is a clause that those purchases, those ag purchases were supposed to continue.
Yep.
That didn't happen. So is there an opportunity to go back to the negotiating table and finish some of these unfinished items that could be really beneficial for ag?
Lots to watch in this year ahead.
Absolutely.
John, for folks who want to keep up on the work that Terrain does, watching this industry as a whole, where would you send them?
Well, you know, Terrain is an offering of our farm credit partners, American Ag Credit, Farm Credit Services of America, and Frontier Farm Credit. Terrain Ag is where you can go get that information. You know, we're trying to help farmers make more informed business decisions, and in this environment today, it's needed now more than ever.
Thank you, John, for that update. We will be watching those export sales announcements for the next several months when it comes to the commodity markets. But folks, stick around. We'll have more this week in agribusiness, including a look at how the spray drone industry has changed when we come back.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Last week, we got word that a potential strike among exporters or container shippers on U.S. Gulf and East Coast ports has been averted, at least for now. Joining us for an update on all things transportation now is Mike Steenhoek. He's the executive director of the Soulje Transportation Coalition. And Mike, thanks for talking with us this week.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Now that we've got this potential container port issue strike averted for now, are there any other labor issues on the horizon that we need to be aware of, Mike?
Yeah, fortunately, this was one of the big ones that remained to be resolved. There's a similar negotiation occurred on the West Coast, different labor union, different management, but were able to get their contract resolved. We did have a railroad worker and railroad new contract get instituted a couple years ago. They're already starting to work on the next contract, however. So fortunately, it looks like there's more peace on this foreseeable future, and that's obviously good news if you care about having a predictable, reliable supply chain.
Absolutely. We certainly need that for agriculture. Now, Mike, bigger picture coming from Washington, D.C., we couldn't see Congress get a farm bill done last year, but they did get the Water Resources Development Act done, the farm bill for the inland waterways. Were there any big changes to those programs here as we get into 2025?
Yeah, very happy to see Congress and the administration get something done. Granted, it was at the very bottom of the ninth inning, but still happy to see a Water Resources Development Act get achieved. One of the notable things that's included in that now law is a change in what's called the cost share agreement for when you're building a new lock and dam or you're doing a major rehabilitation at that lock and dam. Prior to this new legislation, 65% of those costs were assumed by the federal government, 35% by the private sector in the form of a diesel tax that barge companies pay and goes into a trust fund. With the new law that has now been signed, 75% of that responsibility is the federal government, 25% is the private sector. And so the whole goal of this is by having a greater federal investment in our inland waterway system, projects will get done more quickly, and then you're able to proceed to the next items on your to-do list when it comes to locks and dams. So very good news on that front.
That is good news. Mike, before we let you go, of course, the soy growers have made investments in the infrastructure value chain all across this country. Have you made any recently for farmers to help access broader export markets?
Yeah, one of the best ways to enhance the competitiveness of U.S. soybean exports is to invest in the infrastructure that accommodates it. And so we did have a couple projects recently, one at the Port of Houston, in partnership with the company, the Andersons, which will increase the amount of soybean meal that's being exported from that area, as well as the Pacific Northwest, an important investment at the Port of Kalama in Washington State.
All right, growth happening there, helping get that American soy around the world to the buyers who need it. Mike Steenhoek, Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, thanks for joining us.
Greg Soulje is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Greg Soulje is back with a look at the precipitation outlook for next week. And Greg, who's going to see what?
Largely in the southern plains, the southeastern reaches of the country. You may not necessarily like the look and feel of said precipitation before all is said and done. What will probably start off as rain systems, but as these colder lobes continue to penetrate all the way down to the Gulf Coast, transition to accumulating snow, maybe some rain, snow mix, and some sleet and freezing rain. Far south is maybe Galveston, Houston, north of New Orleans, into the southeastern reaches of the country as well. So problems big time down here, although moisture amounts to be certainly lighter in comparison. Meanwhile, lighter in comparison will be the accumulating snow downwind of the Great Lakes region and some of these system snows across the Great Plains and into parts of the Pacific Northwest. Maybe a little spotty moisture in the southwestern reaches of the country. Little to none continuing on in through California.
As you look at the next week, January 27th, Greg, do you see a warm-up for anybody?
No real warm-up, and again, whenever we get some moderation in these cold outbreaks, don't necessarily like to use the combination of windy, warmer weather because it doesn't feel that way. It's much even lower and of more significance, chill in mind for outdoor work. So you're still layered up out there while temperatures have moderated some, and the only way to moderate these temperatures is to get wind involved. The main mother lode for now up across the far northeastern sections of the Canadian prairie. A little bit of warmth in through areas of the southwestern reaches of the country. Still the busy weather pattern returning into the Pacific Northwest. Frequent snows here, snow and ice all the way down to the Gulf Coast, perhaps again at some point, swinging into the northeast of New England, and will lay out some additional snowfall for the central Corn Belt. Dry as you would not really expect into the Canadian prairie.
Does that cold stick around for that first full week in February?
It kind of moderates in some areas. Otherwise, it is kind of retrograding back to the west. Here's the main mother lode right here. Sub-zero cold. Plenty of cold over the northern half of the country. A little warmth making its way through the Gulf Coast and southeastern part of the country. A busy storm track, which includes largely all snow, some ice into the Pacific Northwest, much of the Corn Belt, Ohio Valley, into the northeast of New England, and icy mixture probably into the mid-Atlantic region.
Well, take us into February 10th. Greg, what do you anticipate that week temperature-wise?
Cold is easing on up, and it's moving back northward. The warmth is building across the southern states, but this means basically a pretty stormy weather pattern into the Pacific Northwest. Frequent late-season snow and mixed snow and ice for areas of the Corn Belt. Southern mid-Atlantic region probably gets into showers and thunderstorms, additional snowfall into areas of the northeast of New England. But unfortunately, it's still a very dry weather pattern across areas of West Texas into the southwestern reaches of the country, where dryness and drought will continue to expand.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of versatile high-speed discs and achieve better results with every pass. Visit Brandt.ca for more. Dan Hueber talked about the impressive market rally this week, and now Bruce Blythe, senior editor at Farm Futures magazine, joins us. Bruce, that rally kicked off with the report release last Friday. We saw some big drops to corn and soy production, didn't we?
We did. USDA was only expected to make small reductions to the corn and soybean harvest estimates from last year. Instead, we saw much bigger cuts than we expected, close to 300 bushels in corn, about 100 million bushels in soybeans. And a lot of that we think was just due to heat and dryness late last summer that took the top off yields. So as a result, we ended up with quite a bit smaller numbers than we expected. And of course, that set the markets off, triggered a pretty sharp rally in both corn and soybeans. Corn futures got to the highest levels in over a year based on the nearby futures, and soybeans hit 3-month highs. So that's kind of shaking things up here in the markets in the middle of winter.
It certainly has. You mentioned we took the top ends off of those yields in this most recent report. I know USDA in December had U.S. corn yield at 183.1. Bruce, what did they end up bringing it down to?
The average nationwide yield, they ended up taking down almost 4 bushels an acre to I believe it was 179.3 bushels an acre from 183.1 in the November report. So I think that was another eye opener too that few people saw coming. Soybean yield 50.7 bushels an acre, average nationwide. That's down about a bushel from November. So again, quite a bit bigger cuts than people were expecting. And again, I think it just goes back to the weather we saw late last summer that pinched those final yields.
Absolutely. That late drought came on and just took so much top end away. Bruce, now this time of year, of course, market watchers are also paying attention to what's happening in South America. Did the USDA make any big adjustments to that country's expected crop size?
They did not make many adjustments to South America. In fact, they left the Brazil soybean crop unchanged, 169 million metric tons. That's still a record. We've seen a lot of private estimates a little bit higher than that. I think a lot of people were looking for an increase to the Brazil crop. They didn't get it. However, we're still expecting a massive crop out of Brazil. Now, Argentina's a bit more of a wild card. There's been some heat and dryness that have expanded a little bit in prime growing areas, and that's become a bit of a concern and got trade's attention. And I think that's helped push the soybean market up a little bit over the past week, in corn as well. So,
lots to watch here as this growing season moves ahead, both in North America and in South America. Bruce Blythe at Farm Futures will keep an eye on all of it. Bruce, thanks for talking with us this week.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, stick around. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness after this.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. In the Tractor Shed this weekend, I want to get you a little bit excited about that part of the tractor nobody gets excited about when they restore it. Now, this Minneapolis Moline tractor I'm about to show you was made in 1959. It's a Mini Mo 4-star. That's an almost 50 horsepower tractor. And it has a lot to like here in the cold of January. As you look at that tractor, look at the front end. Look at those headlights, that grill. That's a beautiful looking tractor in its own right. Then you go to the side. Here's the glamour shot. You see the nameplate, you see the engine. My goodness, it's beautiful. And that LP tank. Oh my, that really stands out. But this is the part of the tractor that gets restored and no one pays attention to it when they're taking pictures. The back end of the tractor. Oh yeah, let's look at the rear here. The drawbar, you've got the hitch back there, you've got the rear light back there. In many instances, you have hydraulic connections back there as well. The PTO, with or without the shield. So when you restore a tractor, you don't ignore the back end. And then when you take the pictures, don't ignore it then either. This one is at the American Tractor Museum, Perryville, Missouri. You've heard me talking about it. It's about 85 miles south of the Gateway Arch at St. Louis. Just go down I-55, and it's about 4 miles, less than 10 minutes off of Interstate 55 at Perryville, Missouri. Go see those folks sometime. Tell them Max sent you. Oh yeah, tell this guy that we sent you to. Mark Stock at Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. Big Iron will sell livestock, machinery, real estate, and classic cars. January the 21st, the Nebraska Sandhills Breeding Stock Auction. On Wednesday, January the 22nd, Cody Hansen from South Dakota will have a sale. Tiffany Cattle Company from Allen and Harrington, Kansas will sell quality machinery. Bolte Farms, LLC in Jewel, Kansas. M&B Sander Farms, LLC from Gorman, Kansas. On Thursday, January the 23rd, Dwayne and Lori Miller are retiring. They're by Sheffield, Illinois. 38 pieces of extra clean farm machinery. And Max, we're selling a lot of real estate. Tuesday, January the 21st, 256 acres of Adams County, Illinois land will sell in 4 tracts. Wednesday, January the 22nd, 154 acres of Pike County, Illinois land will sell. On Thursday, January the 23rd, 35 acres will sell in 2 tracts. And on Friday, January the 24th, 180 acres of Schuyler County, Illinois land will sell in 3 tracts. And 156 acres of Cass County, Nebraska land will sell in 2 tracts. Plus, we're gearing up for the Sullivan Collector Car Auction that will be held in March. Go to bigiron.com and sullivanauctioneers.com for all the latest information.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're getting to know Sarah Alt. She's serving as a vice president for the Tennessee State FFA this year. And Sarah, thanks so much for talking with us.
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here today.
So now I understand you are representing Western Tennessee as the vice president. Sarah, fill us in on the agriculture of West Tennessee.
Yeah, so not coming from a traditional agriculture background, I didn't really know what the agriculture in my hometown looked like until I got involved with the National FFA organization. So as I built my knowledge base on agriculture in my area, across the state, and across America, I really started to realize that where I'm from, we're very predominant in crop production. Being located right next to the Mississippi River bottoms creates a great opportunity for big crop yields and crop fertility, but there are also plenty of livestock opportunities as well in West Tennessee. Actually, a funny nickname for our chapter, my home chapter, was the Big Bowl chapter, which relates back to cotton bolls, which I think is extremely fitting with the tradition and history of our location in agriculture in our area.
Absolutely. Now, Sarah, you didn't grow up in agriculture, so what made you want to be a part of FFA?
So really, funny story. So I walked into my freshman agri-science class having no idea that agriculture was anything more than farming. So I was like, this is probably just going to be a one-year thing, get 2 credits. and head on out and never return back to the ag building again. Yet I did get hooked into doing some public speaking events. I got involved my freshman year and I participated in the Creed Speaking Leadership Development event, and I was fortunate enough to win the state contest and go on to compete at national convention. There I was top 16 in the nation in that contest, and it was a phenomenal memory. Made so many great friends along the way and got me involved in FFA and kept me going.
Wow, Sarah, that is fantastic. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished through FFA, and we wish you the best of luck as your career goes forward, and hopefully we'll see you back in the industry. We love smart folks in agriculture.
Sure thing.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by PTx, a new brand from AGCO that includes precision ag technologies from Precision Plantings and PTx Trimble. It's cold in Illinois. Sub 20-degree weather means not a lot of crops are going in the ground, but farmers are still looking forward for what's to come in this next season, and Chad Colby is as well.
Next week is Precision Planting's annual winter conference, held in live format in Tremont, Illinois, not too far from Peoria here in central Illinois. If you've never attended the event, I highly encourage you to do so. They'll have several thousand farmers from all over the Midwest attend in person. They also have remote locations in about 8 states where you can go watch with your local dealer. They're going to showcase products like their Vision system for sprayers, and essentially you can take your older machine, add their Symphony system like the Vision cameras you see right here, and then you can have See and Spray on your sprayer at home. The other thing that they debuted last year, which was very impressive, was their suite of agronomic products around soil sampling called Radical Agronomics. And essentially what they're doing with that system is fully automating the process. Certainly you've got to go pull the samples, and that can be a challenge as well, but they've worked on that too. And they've got their geotubes, which essentially, once you get the soil processed and the geopress, it goes in the tube, and then the machine will automatically take care of it. What's very unique about this process is it's extremely consistent and very hands-off and fully automated. There's a lot of attention in this space for obvious reasons. Another product they debuted last year was the Cornerstone Row Unit. This is the very first time that Precision Planting has ever offered a complete row unit. And remember, the priorities of the planter pass, that's been talked about since Precision Planting started back in 1993. And now you can take your old toolbar, remove those old row units, and drop on the latest technology. Talk to your Precision Planting dealer about these. They're in limited availability this year. But the nice part is you can set these up however you configure your planter, and certainly we know that varies in a lot of locations across the country. If you have not attended the Precision Planting Conference in the last few years, I highly encourage you to do so. Go out to precisionplanting.com to learn more and sign up today. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Well, we're not done. Of course, we will have more coming later in the program about spray drones. Specifically, we'll be talking with the company that brought the first spray drones into the United States. Farmers have a lot of options on hand when it comes to applying crop protection chemicals to their fields. They can drive over those fields in big sprayers, or recently, they've gained the ability to spray them with drones. Simon Aslan's the head of HSE UAV, and I asked him how his operation fits into the drone ecosystem.
We do consider ourselves the spray drone experts. We started our veteran-owned business in 2009. And we brought spraying drones to the United States in 2015 as one of the very first, if not the first, companies to do so.
That's incredible. I mean, this drone industry has exploded tremendously in 15 years. You guys have been in business, leading the industry. You mentioned you're veteran-owned. And what all services does HSE UAV provide?
Absolutely. So we offer the equipment sales. We offer product knowledge and training classes for the equipment. And we do also partner with dealers for services as well.
Gotcha. Now, when we think about spray drones, I mean, we've been hearing about them here at the Farm Progress Show for at least the last 5 years. We've had folks on the grounds displaying it, but it always seems like it's coming. These spray drones are coming. They're almost here, but that's not the case anymore. This is an industry that's here. It's established. Can you give us an update overall? How many acres are we seeing sprayed by drones today?
It's unbelievable. I mean, the technology has progressed so much over the last just couple years. It's really gone from being a research tool to something that every farmer can have in their barn. In 2023, we know the spraying drones collectively have sprayed over 4 million acres.
Wow!
Over 50 types of crops just in the United States. And I truly believe that in 2024, when we get these stats for next year, we'll probably see that number close to double.
Oh, wow.
I
No
really
kidding.
believe
So we're talking 10 million acres maybe by the end of the 2025-24 growing season. Simon, let's talk a little bit about the drones that you guys offer, that you're working with your growers. Precision technology is such a key component of this, and especially when it comes to efficiency with margins like this. Talk about how your clients have used drones to be better operators.
Absolutely. So we offer a couple different brands of spraying drones. We are not exclusive to a particular brand. We really like to sell and offer what we think works best. So that's something that makes us a little bit different. We really primarily offer the two most popular models that we sell are XAG, which is one brand, and DJI, which is another. They're the two top selling models globally currently.
Gotcha. What kind of features do they bring to the market on the spray type drones? What should farmers be looking for as we dip our toe into this industry?
Right. So efficiency and productivity is really what farmers want. They want to see which one can do the most acres per hour. So that's one of the key aspects. Our largest model that we offer can get up to 70 acres per hour in ideal operations. And that's just with one drone. And one of the beauties of spraying drones is it's very easily scalable. So you can double, triple, quadruple the operation if you need to.
Thank you, Simon. And if you'd like to learn more, you can visit their website at hse-uav.com. And thank you all for joining us here today. Be sure to catch us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness. Take care, everyone.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.